Hello and welcome to ANC Decides with me, your host Mpumalanga. At ANC Decides, we're putting out questions for our viewers, particularly ANC members, on issues relevant to the December conference. Now today we're asking, should President Zuma stay in office until 2019, given everything that's happening? Well, we encourage ANC branch members to send their replies on Twitter, #ANC Decides. You can also log on to our website at www.ann7.com. Now, the ANC in Mpumalanga says the nominations of candidates to succeed President Jacob Zuma in December is not on the cards yet. However, the province supports the call to have a consensus slate to unite the party in preparation for the 2019 elections. Lemogang Foke filed this report for us.
Provinces have started to position themselves as the ANC succession race gains momentum. But Mpumalanga is playing it safe, choosing to opt for a unity slate.
On the decision-making process, the D doesn't lie with the province. The D lies with the branches of the African National Congress. So we decided to convene the PGC to conscientize our branches that there is no detour to the National Conference. There is no short left, no short right to Nasrec. We have got so many candidates, others are just moving around here, nominating themselves. But if at the end of the day, as provinces will be able to sit down and agree that out of all the slates that are currently on the public domain, if we'll agree on one slate, and that will be the slate of the ANC, we'll all be happy.
Gauteng is also strategically playing a wait-and-see game, saying it would be premature for the province to announce its preferred candidate at the moment.
The PEC took a decision that we must engage all other provinces and try to arrive at a consensus. So announcing a decision when we have not engaged people is not helpful. And also you don't take a decision and say, I will not be convinced by anybody, because we're trying to find each other. Ultimately, the decision of Gauteng must also be influenced by the bilateral engagements which Gauteng is having with other provinces.
The unity option is said to be aimed at avoiding another ANC split. A potential split is anticipated to be worse than the one seen in Polokwane in 2007.
We have said to comrade, these factions need to be dismantled. We were part of going to Polokwane. Those days when we were going to Polokwane, I tell comrades that we're very angry. We're so angry that we came to a point where we didn't realize that in our anger we're destroying the organization. But we cannot repeat that problem again.
The jury is still out on who the province will back in the elective conference in December. The ANC in Mpumalanga says now is not the time to entertain politics slates, but to unify the organization by reaching a consensus leadership moving forward. Lemogang Foke, January Masilela House, Mbombela.
And our reporter Lemogang joins us live now. Now, Lemo, it's actually no secret that the ANC, at least Premier David Mabuza, has a unified ANC behind him. But can you just talk us through the political climate now? They had their PGC, and we saw that a number of chairpersons were there, and the so-called unified or unity slate was sold to them. So what is the political climate right now?
A very good afternoon to you, Mfundo, and thank you very much indeed. You are correct. It is no secret that there is a unity, and it is being indicated here in this province in Mpumalanga. You will remember in the PGC that was held recently, where we had 5 provinces coming together, and a very strong message that came out of that PGC, Mfundo, is unity and fighting for unity within the organization. We understand that this is something that the province had initiated and also followed by other provinces. We had the provinces such as Free State, KZN, as well as Gauteng coming together with Mpumalanga. Now, Mfundo, you look at those provinces that are said to bring over 2,500 delegates coming into the elective conference in December. And with that said, Mfundo, you know, we might see a turning point in the way that things are currently playing out right now, where we see a lot of candidates campaigning currently. But, you know, with this notion, it suggests suggests that now is not the time to talk candidates, Mfundo. Now we should be focusing on unity, and not only will that unity bring us into the elective conference, but also coming out of the elective conference and into the general elections in 2019, saying that they're looking for a leader that will be able to further unite the organization and not bring about divisions that we've currently seen within the ANC. And that is the stance that Mpumalanga has, saying that it has support of those other provinces that I have already mentioned. But for further analysis, Nomfundo, I want to bring in Mbuso Tumbati of Nombuso Communications Group, just to talk through some of the decisions that have been made by the province and how that will affect the outcomes, or rather how that will affect going into the elective conference in December. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a little bit of a chat earlier on, but what is your thinking on the current political climate in the province?
Well, it is no secret that the province is moving towards or campaigning for what they call unity, which is correct. However, we need to go deep into that and look at what is entailed by this unity project of the province, as led by Premier Mabuza, or the chairperson of the ANC. It is not easy to go straight and say this unity is genuine or not. It could be that it is pushed so that whatever faction is able to galvanize support and win in December as we go to the provincial to the national conference of the ANC. So one is not able to tell straight as to whether this unity project, as led or championed by the province, is indeed genuine.
Yes, I understand that, one might not be able to tell at this point whether it is genuine or not, or whether in fact it will work. But say, for instance, having the backing of the other provinces, what do you think if we have that majority of the provinces going into the elective conference saying that we want unity over any other interest? What do you think will happen in that situation?
Well, it depends what unity is. And we cannot tell straight that as they come here and deliberate on what Mabuza means by unity, we don't know what they will go when they go back to their provinces. There are dynamics in politics. You can never be sure until the last hour, the last minute of any conference. Politics is just like that. So we can't be sure now that this project of Mabuza of unity will indeed survive.
And some would also say, this notion is very strategic, and that this might be the chairperson of Mpumalanga also campaigning for himself. Do you think we can expect to see surprises along that?
Oh, of course, yes. Mabuza has been tipped by various provinces, various regions of the ANC throughout the country. He is positioning himself to lead the ANC, either as president or deputy president, and the engagements are continuous. Hence, you can see some of leaders of the ANC in various provinces coming to him. It happened when the ANC was in the National Policy Conference. Various leaders of the ANC were seen engaging Mabuza lobbyist. So he is indeed positioning himself. However, he's not one person who will come out in the open and declare himself and say, look, I'm available, lead me. He often wants to make people believe that whenever he is called to lead, he is available and ready to lead. Because he plays his card very close to his chest, and he doesn't want people to understand how he leads. However, he is available and he is indeed ready to lead. That's according to his leaders, to his lobbyists, of course.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was Mbuso Tumbati of Nombuso Communications Group, just talking to us about, the political climate in this province as a build-up to the elective conference. What this province is saying is that, they're putting unity ahead of everything, putting the interests of the ANC ahead of that of the province. Back to you in studio, Nomfundo.
And goodbye for now. An interesting analysis, gentlemen. We will be coming back to dissect that. Now, they're at least talking about the nature of politics, that it is, by its very nature, unpredictable. We're now joined by Giovanni Matani, who's in Bloemfontein, where the Free State PSC is underway. Giovanni.
Indeed, thank you so So much, Mfundo. We do understand that once we got into the Free State, we got a vibe from the ANC members, those who are of branch delegates and those who are just passionate about the African National Congress. We got to feel that they too are a bit confused in this towards this presidential race, knowing that there are the two main candidates, which we do know is Cyril Ramaphosa as well as Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. That also has come with a lot of media lights and speculations around the stories of their backgrounds, not political stories that will obviously be affecting them should they become president. We also know there are other front runners like Baleka Mbete as well as Matthew Poza, who have also said that they are here as well. Lindiwe Sisulu, who has also said that she is available should the organization wish for her to lead the movement forward. But with me, just to clear some things out in the Free State, is the Secretary General, William Bulwane. Thank you so much for joining us. We do understand that with the recent meeting of the chairs in Mpumalanga, there has been a lot of media talk around where Premier and Chair of the Free State, Ace Magashule, lies. Is there a comment for this?
I think the media is not putting this in perspective on what the provincial chair talked about, particularly in the interview that he has in the past week. Because he was asked that specific question, and then in his answers was, irrespective of who become the president of the ANC, it must be somebody who will unify the African National Congress moving forward. So we are moving from that premise. We are not abandoning any. And then the meeting that we had in Mpumalanga, per invitation, because we invited as the Free State, and then on our arrival there we met, Gauteng was there, KZN was there, Northwest was there, Limpopo was also invited, but it was not there. But the central message to all what it has been said, it was, when we go to this conference, we must make sure that we get the leadership that will unite the African National Congress. I think the central message to all the speakers there, it was the unity of the ANC and the leadership that will be able to unite the African National Congress. So we have heard in the media speculating that the chairs abandoned so and so is supporting so and so. I think we want to dismiss that as untrue, because that's not what the chair said and talked about in that interview.
We definitely know that there is this term called the Premier League, knowing that these heads of each province were there and present at Mpumalanga. Does this not play as a setback in the campaign of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma?
We went to Mpumalanga as per invitation from the leadership of that particular province. The correspondence I received and communicated to the ANC in the province, it was, we are invited. But on our arrival, we met other people there. And then I think we need to deal with this once and for all again. We have dealt with it in the NEC. NEC agreed and expelled the notion that it is a Premier League. We agreed there is nothing of that particular nature. There is no Premier League. So all the people who were invited there, they were invited on their capacities, because we agreed in the NEC that the chair and the secretaries of provinces must try to unite the ANC, because the delegates are going to come from the provinces. No national delegates go into that conference. Delegates, 90% of delegates are from the branches of the African National Congress. And the provinces are running the branches and the provinces where these branches are. So I think it was on those bases that everybody was called there. And then we agreed. Even Comrade Paul, who's not a premier for that matter, agreed that he would like us to have that kind of a meeting in Gauteng, where the Premier, Ace Magashule, the chair of the ANC, will talk. Because their invitation in that meeting, it was not about the premiers, it was about the chairs of the ANC coming together. So he said, we are going to arrange this particular kind of meeting to talk with all. Mpumalanga must be here, Free State must be here, Northwest must be here, and we are going to include more provinces to come together
So
Final question, sorry, quickly. You've spoken about this unifying candidate. Do you think that it can be either Nkosazana or Cyril? Because obviously there's this factionalism state that has been said. Was this discussions at the PEC today?
I'm too afraid to go specifically because branches haven't yet nominated. So I can't be on the way of the branches to say who they have nominated. So let's wait until that process. Nomination forms are there in the branches, they nominate, and then you can ask me this question. I'm prepared to answer it.
Thank you very much. So as you've heard from the National Policy Conference that did take place in June, July this year, towards the National Elective Conference, a lot of terms have been thrown there, like this radical economic transformation, inclusive growth. We know, as we've heard now, that the Premier League, that term has been wiped out. We also know that this white monopoly capital as well has been wiped out. So all eyes are on the Free State in terms of where they're going from here. The PEC continues to take place, and decisions will definitely continue being made.
Thank you very much. That's Giovanni Machani out in Free State, giving us at least what's happening there pertaining to the PEC and the sitting that they had today. Now, joining us in studio are political analysts Oliver Dixon and Jackie Shando. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Now, perhaps we can start with you, Jackie. I mean, they were speaking about, if we had to go to Mpumalanga, they were talking about the unpredictable nature of politics, that whatever that the Premier there is proposing as a unity slate, we don't know. Sure. What is the rationale behind this? Is this really for unity or self-preservation?
Sure. First and foremost, this notion of unity must be deconstructed. And I think the person from Mpumalanga spoke along those lines. What do you mean? What does it entail? Because if you are speaking about unity in the form of a person, then that also speaks to complete misdiagnosis of the ANC problem and by extension the South African problem today.
All right.
That it is not just an individual that is going to unite the ANC. First, we must speak about what divides the ANC, right? And we've seen in the past couple of months. Now you have two camps.
What divides the ANC?
We've seen in terms of the way forward, we've seen in terms of reflecting from 1994, what were the key priorities of this democratic dispensation? What were the pressing challenges that the ANC, having broken the back of the apartheid apparatus, set itself to achieve? And I can tell you, and most Africans agree with me, in the main, it is economic liberation of the black majority that had been exploited, oppressed, and marginalized by a white minority dictatorship in the form of English colonialism and the Dutch settler apartheid that begins in 1948. So when 1994 comes, we're now speaking about, in the main, economic emancipation. Even if you go back to 1944, in the founding principles of the ANC Youth League, led by Anton Lembede, economic freedom, freedom in our lifetime spoke fundamentally to issues of bread and butter.
But if we get to the crux of the matter, what divides them today?
What divides the ANC today is the fact that, first, there are those who realize inside the ANC, correctly so, more than 2 decades into this dispensation, we have not shifted resources from the settler white minority into the African majority. It has not happened. In fact, all indications, all research, statistics show actually the white minority has consolidated its wealth, and black people as a group, having been ravaged by both colonialism and apartheid, have actually gotten poorer. So there are those who agree, and they've come around with certain strategies, radical economic transformation.
So you're saying there are those that sympathize with capital in the country?
Absolutely. You have a candidate that has particularly said nothing. All we need is economic growth. All we need is economic growth and
Dixon,
job creation.
as you laugh, perhaps we can just rope you in. Your take on this?
Look, I agree with Jackie 100%. But I can't tell you what the candidates' positions on economic policy are. It's very speculative at this stage, and we're puzzling pieces together from what we hear from funerals and rallies where speeches are being made. But do we have a comprehensive framework on a document by either of the 6 to 8 candidates? No, we don't. We just have bits and pieces over here. But so I think Jack is a bit unfair there. But he's right, 100%. We need to understand what divides the ANC. So at this stage, I think there's conceptually a misunderstanding between what the division is. Is the division ideas? Is the division people? At this stage, it's a conflation of both of these. The division is ideas about who is willing. It's a contest about who is willing to stray as far away from our current free market economic policy behavior as possible, and who's not willing to do any sort of that. But it's balancing that sort of action against cosmopolitan economics and the global order going towards trade blocks, i.e. BRICS, doing business with international forces. So all of these things need to be balanced, and I don't think we're really deconstructing that conversation just
but
yet.
some are also throwing something that's more controversial, such as patronage in all of this, that beyond ideas, that perhaps there's certain, that proximity to resources, that also maybe they're also battling for that, for some.
Look, you see, the thing about patronage is that we have very little actual evidence in courts that can point us to systems of patronage. If I were to ask you what's the biggest corruption scandal about someone that's actually been arrested that the court of law found this was entirely corrupting, we may have to point to John Block in the Northern Cape, who was the chairperson of the ANC in the Northern Cape at some point. I think that's the biggest sort of scandal we have over there. Everything else is entirely speculative and needs to go through court procedures, needs to go through commissions of inquiry, and only then can we speak there. So I think at this moment we can speak of patronage, and I think patronage exists at many levels. It exists at municipal levels, where municipal managers, where councils are busy killing each other, as we see in KwaZulu-Natal, just to be able to control resources, sitting on tender committees, awarding tenders in that local municipality and those sort of things. Patronage exists over there. It exists at provincial level and perhaps even at national level. But I think while that's an important conversation to have, we shouldn't allow the conversation of corruption and patronage to sway us away from the real conversation about what the economy looks like right now versus what it needs to look like going forward. And I think that's the more important conversation to have. I think, look, we are losing 30 billion per annum or whatever the state may be losing to corruption. Sure, but we're losing even more of that to private capital fleeing the country. We're losing even more of that to, and look, for corruption in government to exist, there must be a private company willing to cooperate and facilitate that sort of corruption. So the private sector is just as complicit in corruption conversations as certain state officials are.
There's a broader conversation, but if we had to bring it back to this candidate now, beyond this unity slate, it seems there's an identity. It's not something that is solid at this point, but Zweli Mkhize. He's a physician. He's somewhat of a quiet politician, some would say, but nevertheless, his name hasn't been attached to scandal, although some say now that he's basically put his hand up, we could see something like that, where perhaps those that don't want to see him extend to the position could then bring out some of those scandals. What do we think of this candidate?
Again, I think there's this fetish with, perhaps it also speaks to ideological bankruptcy in the entire political landscape in the country. We seem to fetishize, to obsess with personalities and not look beyond. What do they represent? What is their vision? I've heard the name of Zweli Mkhize. I have no reason to be for or against it thus far, because I have not heard him speak on the pressing issues that have been neatly unpacked even by my colleague here. South Africa is the most unequal society on the planet in terms of the wealth gap. The wealth gap has widened from 1994. It's even worse than it was more than 20 years ago. So if you speak about someone as a leader of South Africa, there are 30 million black South Africans who have been declared very recently existing below the poverty line. So I don't know why we move away from that issue. Massive unemployment, especially in the black community, somewhere towards 70%. I don't understand, as a governing party, as a voting delegate in December, how I am moved away from those real existing issues affecting living human beings to issues of he has these credentials, she has these credentials. And I want to differ with my colleague here, because at least whether she's committed or not, I am heartened that we have heard Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma in particular say radical economic transformation, the economy is still in the hands of the white minority. I am heartened to hear her openly speak about the existence and the influence and the hegemony of white monopoly capital. We've not heard that from Cyril. And it's very worrying that Cyril is so endorsed by the oppressors of our people, white monopoly capital in this country and beyond. We've not heard that from Zweli Mkhize, even uttering the word white monopoly capital. And if I were...
Perhaps we can just rope you in, Dixon. Just closing remarks quickly. I mean, if he's saying that we need to be talking beyond unifying the ANC, because this person must become the first citizen of the country. So do they have those attributes to lead beyond that? Because we're not hearing him pronounce on issues that pertain to South African citizens.
Okay, look, let's assume, for the purposes of this conversation, that Jackie is correct about Cyril's position on radical economic transformation, and that is he has no position at all. Let's assume that is the case. What would a unifying slate actually look like? Would it look like how Gwede Mantashe described it, where we have Cyril and Nkosazana serve together in the top 6? I think that would be problematic, because there you have a clash of two fundamental ideas that pull in polar opposite directions, and you don't get anything done. So unity needs to look a little bit different away from personalities and need to look towards issues. For instance, the economic conversation we've been having in South Africa over the last 20 years is how do we maximize the resources we currently have, not how do we get more resources from those who have a strong hold over those resources. So unless Nkosazana Dlamini or Cyril comes and says, I will reclaim the land and the state will become the sole custodian of the land, I am not convinced they have any idea what they're talking about on radical economic transformation. We cannot set the bar so low where Jackie says, at least she said it. She needs to say it with an action plan. And that action plan is not concrete, not she, like all of them, Matthew Sposa too. And if that action plan is not concrete...
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And that's where we leave it. Now, thank you to everybody and the team here at ANC Decides. Until tomorrow.
How about you give us too little time?